Hello and welcome. This presentation is going to be about titles. Titles, in my view, are probably the least thought about item in a student piece of work, but it's the most important thing you'll write. So what I want to do on this slide really is just to position what I'm going to do, because the idea or the knowledge behind writing a title is actually quite vast, and I want to be really simple and keep it concise for you guys so we don't get lost in all that detail. So by the end of this presentation you will start to understand what a title is. You'll have a writing frame to be able to shape a title so it's good. I will not talk about the theories and approaches behind understanding how we approach writing titles. So no theory. So titles. There's different type of titles, or more appropriately is there's different levels of titles. And essentially what we need to understand is that titles represent a different level of abstraction. When I talk about abstraction, I talk about the level of understanding or the level of knowledge or the volume of information. Another way of saying this, the length of the title or the more words there are within the title. So this idea of level of abstraction determines what words or how many words there are within the title. It's a bit more complex than that, but let's keep it simple. And to help me to understand the idea of abstraction, what I do is I remember in terms of computing that the use case diagram has fewer words, if you will, so fewer information. So the level of abstraction is very high, so top level view, if you will. Whereas opposite to that would be the activity diagram, which has much more information and much more detail. So the level of abstraction is much lower. And when we think about a title, we can think about it in those terms. If the title tells us very little, then the abstraction level is much higher, so almost like a use case diagram. Whereas the title tells us lots of information, then it's more like an activity diagram. And that's really important to understand, because it's that greyness, if you will, the difference between a high level and low level title, which leads to the confusion between students and lecturer in terms of what makes a good title. This idea of level of abstraction. What I want you to do now is just spend probably 10 minutes, no more than that, just 10 minutes. Go on to your favourite website, whether that's IEEE or something similar, and find 20 journal papers or articles linked to the topic which you're going to investigate for your research paper or for your project. And what I want you to do is look at those titles and identify two things. I want you to identify the keywords which they're using. So is there a common keyword across all 20 titles? For example, investigate or compute or compare. What keywords are common across all these 20 titles? And is there a recurring pattern which you see across these titles? Predicting something or an analysis of something. And that's really important, because that's starting to get you to think about the abstraction within that title. I'm just going to give you 10 minutes to do that, and then I'm going to move on. Okay, so we've done that activity now. We've had a little chat about the findings as a group. What we're going to do now is talk about where titles come from, or where they're generated, if you will. And lots of different ways or approaches or pathways we can use to identify this, but I always come back to these three. The first one is the title is going to tell us about testing or analysing a theory. That's often linked within a title. So we're going to test something to show that the theory is right or wrong, or is applicable to this particular situation. The second one is we're going to do some testing or analysis to support a position. For example, Windows is better than Unix or something similar. Or number three is to find a research gap. So we've been doing some reading, and there's a whole chunk of information missing for a particular area because nobody's done any research. So that's the research gap. And if you're doing a PhD, that's the type of thing you would do. So really, number 3 is almost like a PhD. It's that research gap. And your debate might be part of that research gap. So number 2 might be linked to number 3. So these are actually interconnected as well. So the point I'm making is, when we think about the titles, we're often thinking about the reason we have that title, and the reason we have that title is it tends to be linked to testing or analysing or finding some information, and that's what I want to move on to next. So when we start to write our title for the first time, and what you'll find is the title you start off with now at the start of your journey will be very different to the title you finish with at the end of your journey, because your title will change to reflect what you are discovering as you are doing your literature review, and so on and so forth. But what we do need to do is think about the title in 3 specific ways at this point. It needs to be clear, it needs to be to the point of no unnecessary words. So if it's too waffly, too many words, it's going to get rejected by someone like me, your lecturer. It needs to use specific terms or technical terms. If you're going to talk about cybersecurity, you might need to talk about a specific Wi-Fi protocol opposed to just saying Wi-Fi. So you need to be really clear and specific about what it is you're doing and what it is you're trying to assess. And then also, this last column is this idea of conveying a problem or issue, and that's really simple. You just say, I'm increasing something, or I'm reducing something, or I'm going to allow something to happen, and see what happens. So when we think about writing your title, make it clear, specific, and make sure it conveys a problem. And if it's conveying a problem, it's probably going to have some form of increase or reduce. Okay, so we're now going to get right into the nitty-gritty of this title writing, and this is the bit where that level of abstraction comes into play. I'm dictating, I'm telling you that your level of abstraction is going to be quite low, so down by that activity diagram level, because I want certain knowledge from you within that title. You speak to somebody else, they might say there's too much information, so the level of abstraction of your title needs to be reduced or increased, if you will. In the table here, I just want to look at the social science column, and what I try to do is look at 2 types of project titles which represent the type of projects I see year in, year out. So in the social science side, we've got the what, where, how. And so the what, reduce level of depression, where, within adults care, how, increase social contact through regular exercise. So if I join those 3 things together, that would be my title. So when I start to write a title for a project or for a paper, this is what I do. I do this exact thing, and then what I do is remove those words what, where, how, and just join it together to make a sentence. And that's what I'm saying you will need to do in your assessment, because that means it achieves a lot of the assessment requirements, which we'll talk about in a different video. On the other side, the computer science side, I've done the same thing. So what, to reduce hacking, where, public website, how, increase website security features. So there's me what, where, and how. One thing I want to highlight now is, moving forward from this slide, we will not be using what, where, and how, and I'll talk about that in a few minutes. We will be using problem, issue, solution. So in the future of this video, I'll be talking about problem, issue, solution. So to give a real life example, this is a project, a real project from a university, and it said a Java-based project management system to support multiple location collaboration. And if I break that title down, I know the problem is a multi-location collaboration. I know the issue is the current project management system doesn't allow it. And then the solution will be created using Java. So I got that information from that title. If we look at this title, promoting patients booking through a bespoke Android app, I've identified the problem is patients are not using the current digital booking system because you've got to promote it. The issue, well, we're not really sure what the issue is, i.e. why are the patients not using the app, the booking system, but the solution is will be a mobile phone app coded in Android. So I got 2 out of 3. And what I would say, if you're on my module doing this, I would reject the title because I don't know what the issue is. Other lecturers might accept it because of that idea of level of abstraction. Earlier, I said you must use the keywords problem, issue, and solution. I'm going to explain why now. In computing, we deal with language, and the language we use are problem, issue, solution. We don't use words like what, where, and how. That's what we tend to use in social science or in geography. But in computing, we do use these words, problem, issue, solution, all the time. When you talk to computing people, whether lecturers or people working in industry, they want to know what the problem is and why it is a problem, therefore the issue. They don't care about the what, where, and how. They want to know the problem, issue, and solution. So this is why I'm saying to you that you need to use problem, issue, solution within your work. If we pick up a journal paper or a report, very quickly at the start of the report, they will identify problem, issue, solution or approach and the project aim. This is why I'm forcing you to use problem, issue, solution, because it's used throughout the sector. And then the last one, keywords you use in your title determines what you will write about in your literature review. It will also determine the artifact you will create. That we saw earlier, a Java app or an Android app, because they were in the title, those words were in the title, we've determined already what the artifact will be. And there's an argument about whether that should be in the title and therefore the level of abstraction. So the take-home message. The title are presented at different levels. And the level which you present your title is dependent on the person who's marking your work. That's what it comes down to. Whoever's marking your work will say, I don't want that or I want that. And that's the person you need to speak to. But if somebody like me is marking your work, the title needs to transmit your project intentions. And I will often say that idea to you. Well, what are your project intentions? And when we talk about this idea of project intentions, we're saying, what is the problem, issue, and solution? So I would say that your title needs to indicate problem, issue, and solution. And because your title indicates a problem, issue, solution, it shapes and determines your entire report. You might start off, let's say your final year project, right at the start, you might start off not knowing what the solution is, but you do know what the problem issue is. But when you get to the end of the literature review, you've determined that actually the best solution is X. So what you do is go back to your title and you update your title to reflect what you've discovered as being the best solution. It's not the best way of doing it, but it means that the anchor, that title becomes the anchor, and it clearly directs you through your work, which is really what the title is about. And I've put some of these ideas down at the bottom of the slide. This idea that a title is the guardian star. Every time you get stuck or you're not sure, go back to the title. It's the anchor. It keeps you sturdy and in one place. It stops you wandering and drifting within the research. It keeps you focused. The title is the question. So what are you trying to do? Go back to the title. Right. So the take-home message is, be clear about your title, be clear about the problem, issue, and solution, and make sure it reflects what the person wants who is marking your work.